Montana Territory, 1872. The first frost of autumn had dusted the mountains surrounding Elkhorn Valley, where the town of Silverpine nestled like a splinter driven into the vast wilderness. Isaac Barrett leaned against the fence post of the Last Chance Ranch, his lean 25-year-old frame casting a long shadow in the early morning light. His sandy blonde hair curled beneath the brim of his Stetson, and his clean-shaven face belied the hardness in his blue eyes, eyes that had seen too much death on the frontier. Isaac adjusted his worn leather vest over his cotton shirt and watched as the autumn wind stirred the tall grass. 3 years ago, he had watched his family's homestead burn at the hands of raiders, flames consuming his parents and younger sister while he had been hunting in the hills. Ever since that day, a conviction had taken root in his soul. Love was a liability in the untamed West. Caring for others only gave death another way to wound you. Barrett. "Those cattle ain't going to drive themselves to market," shouted Frank Miller, the foreman of Last Chance Ranch. Isaac touched the brim of his hat in acknowledgement and mounted his chestnut mare. The ranch had been his salvation after months of drifting, offering honest work and a bunkhouse bed. It was all a man needed to survive the frontier, that and the fortitude to keep everyone at arm's length. "Planning to head into town tonight?" asked Seth Donovan, another ranch hand who'd ridden up beside him. "No reason to," Isaac replied, spurring his horse toward the grazing herd. "Town's got nothing I need." Seth chuckled. "New schoolteacher arrived yesterday on the stage. Whole town's buzzing about her. Might be worth a look." Isaac didn't reply, let the other men chase skirts and dream of hearth and home. He had learned the harsh truth. On the frontier, a man lived longer when he stood alone. Little did Isaac know how completely his convictions would be challenged before the week was through. The Golden Nugget Saloon was uncharacteristically crowded for a Tuesday evening. Isaac hadn't planned to come to town, but Frank had sent him with a message for the bank manager about the ranch's loan. Now, with the errand complete and the September night turning cool, he found himself nursing a whiskey at the bar, his back to the wall as was his habit. "Did you see her?" a miner asked his companion. "Prettiest thing that stepped off the stage in Silverpine, I reckon." "Too high and mighty for the likes of you," his friend laughed. "Bookish type, wears spectacles and talks like she swallowed a dictionary." Isaac paid them no mind until the saloon doors swung open, and a hush fell over the room. Framed in the doorway stood Sheriff Thomas Miller, and beside him was a young woman unlike any Isaac had ever seen in these parts. She was dressed properly in a traveling suit of deep blue, her honey-blonde hair pinned neatly beneath a modest hat. But it was her eyes that caught Isaac's attention, large, intelligent eyes the color of summer sage that surveyed the room with curiosity rather than fear. At 22, she carried herself with a dignity that seemed out of place in the rough-hewn saloon. "Gentlemen," the sheriff announced, "I'd like to introduce Miss Abigail Harrison, Silverpine's new schoolteacher. She's looking for Mr. Peterson, the school board chairman." Isaac watched as the young woman smiled politely, unperturbed by the stares of the saloon patrons. Something about her struck him, not just her beauty, which was considerable, but a sense of purpose and conviction that seemed to radiate from her. "Peterson's playing poker in the back," the bartender called out. "Thank you," she replied, her voice cultured yet warm. "Sheriff, would you mind introducing me?" As they moved toward the back room, Isaac couldn't help but notice how every eye followed her progress. There was something remarkable about this woman, something that didn't belong in a frontier town like Silverpine. "Barrett," Seth's voice interrupted his thoughts as the cowboy slid onto the stool beside him. "See something you like?" Isaac turned away, just wondering what a woman like that is doing in a place like this. "Teaching our young uns to read and cipher, from what I hear," Seth said, signaling for a drink. "Though I reckon she won't last the winter. These Eastern ladies never do, too soft for frontier life." Isaac nodded, but something in him disagreed. There was a strength in Miss Harrison's bearing that suggested otherwise. Not that it mattered to him. The schoolteacher's fortunes were none of his concern. Fate, however, had other plans. The following day, Isaac was leading his horse down Main Street when commotion erupted from the general store. He heard a woman's alarmed cry, followed by the angry shouts of Jasper Holden, the town drunk. Without thinking, Isaac tied his horse to the hitching post and strode toward the store. Inside, he found Jasper looming over Miss Harrison, who stood her ground despite the man's obvious intoxication. "You've no right to speak to me that way," she was saying firmly, though Isaac could see the slight tremble in her hands. "Please step back, Mr. Holden." "Think you're better than us, don't you?" Jasper slurred. with your fancy words and Eastern ways." Isaac stepped between them. "That's enough, Holden." The drunk squinted at him. "This ain't your business, Barrett." "It is now," Isaac replied, his voice low and steady. "The lady asked you to step back." For a tense moment, Jasper seemed ready to fight, but even drunk, he recognized the dangerous glint in Isaac's eye. Muttering curses, he staggered toward the door. "This town don't need no uppity schoolmarm," he called over his shoulder. "You'll be gone by Christmas, mark my words." When he'd left, Isaac turned to Miss Harrison, expecting to find her shaken. Instead, she was straightening her skirts with composed dignity. "Thank you, Mr. Barrett," he supplied. "Isaac Barrett." "Thank you, Mr. Barrett. I appreciate your intervention, though I believe I could have managed." Isaac raised an eyebrow. "Holden's mean when he's drinking." "And I'm quite determined when I'm defending myself," she replied with unexpected spirit. Then she smiled, transforming her serious face into something that made Isaac's chest tighten strangely. "But truly, I am grateful. I'm Abigail Harrison." "I know," he said, suddenly aware he was staring. "Everyone knows. News travels quickly in small towns," she observed. "Are you a local, Mr. Barrett?" "Work at Last Chance Ranch," he said shortly, uncomfortable with her direct gaze. "Just passing through town." She nodded, studying him with those remarkable eyes. "Well, it seems fortune favored me with your passage. Perhaps we'll meet again under less contentious circumstances." Isaac touched the brim of his hat. "Ma'am," he said, then turned and left the store, unsettled by the encounter in ways he couldn't explain. Later that evening, as he brushed down his mare in the ranch stables, Isaac found himself thinking of Abigail Harrison's composure in the face of Holden's aggression. Most women of his acquaintance would have dissolved into tears or fled. Her steady courage reminded him of his mother, who had faced the hardships of frontier life with unwavering resolve until her final day. The comparison disturbed him. He had vowed never to form attachments again, yet something about the schoolteacher had slipped past his defenses. It was foolishness, he told himself. She was just another tenderfoot from the east who would either harden or leave when winter bared its teeth. But that night, for the first time in years, Isaac dreamed not of fire and loss, but of sage-green eyes and a smile that transformed the world around it. Autumn deepened across the Montana Territory. Isaac might have avoided town altogether if not for Frank's regular errands. Each time he ventured into Silverpine, he seemed to encounter Miss Harrison, at the mercantile selecting supplies, outside the schoolhouse sweeping the steps, or walking purposefully down the boardwalk with books tucked under her arm. Each encounter left him more disturbed than the last. The schoolteacher had a disarming way of drawing him into conversation, asking questions about ranching or the territory that required more than his usual terse replies. Worse, he found himself wanting to answer, to see the flash of interest in her expressive eyes when he shared knowledge of the land he'd come to know so well. One crisp October afternoon, Isaac was loading supplies into the ranch wagon when he spotted Abigail struggling with an unwieldy stack of books and papers. Before he could think better of it, he crossed the street to her. "Let me help you with those, Miss Harrison." She looked up surprised, then smiled with evident relief. "Mr. Barrett, how fortuitous." "Thank you." As he took the stack from her arms, their fingers brushed, and Isaac felt an unexpected jolt that had nothing to do with the autumn chill. "These are heavy," he commented, falling into step beside her. "What are they all for?" "I'm establishing a proper lending library for the town," she explained, her face animated with enthusiasm. "These are donations from my former school in Boston. Literature, history, natural sciences, knowledge that belongs as much on the frontier as in the East." Isaac glanced at her profile. "Most folks here are more concerned with surviving than reading." "Survival and advancement need not be mutually exclusive," she countered. "The mind requires nourishment just as the body does." She paused, giving him a considering look. "Do you read, Mr. Barrett?" The question stung more than it should have. "My mother taught me," he said stiffly, "before she died." Abigail's expression softened. "I'm sorry for your loss." After a moment she added, "You're welcome to borrow any books that might interest you. The library is for everyone in Silverpine." "Even ranch hands?" he asked, surprised by the bitterness in his voice. "Especially those hungry for knowledge, regardless of their occupation." She stopped at the schoolhouse steps. "Would you mind bringing these inside?" The schoolroom was neat and bright, with rows of desks facing a blackboard. Maps hung on the walls alongside children's drawings. It reminded Isaac painfully of his own brief schooling before frontier necessities had claimed his childhood. "You've done a lot with the place," he observed, setting the books on her desk. "It's coming along," Abigail said, removing her gloves, though some in town seemed determined to see me fail. Isaac frowned. "What do you mean?" She sighed. "There's resistance to certain subjects I wish to teach. Some parents feel girls don't need advanced mathematics or that literature is a frivolous pursuit compared to practical skills." She straightened her shoulders. "And then there are those who simply doubt a woman from the East can endure here long enough to make a difference." Isaac recognized the stubborn lift of her chin, the same determination he'd witnessed during her confrontation with Holden. "And what do you think, Miss Harrison?" Her eyes met his, unwavering. "I think they underestimate both me and their children. I didn't come to the Montana Territory on a whim, Mr. Barrett. I came because there's important work to be done here." Something in her steadfast conviction pierced the armor around Isaac's heart. This wasn't a naive Eastern girl playing at adventure. This was a woman with purpose. "Well," he said, suddenly needing to escape the intimacy of the moment, "I should get back to my errands." Abigail nodded. "Thank you for your help, Mr. Barrett." As he reached the door, she added, "The offer stands about the books. Perhaps you might find something to occupy the long winter evenings." Isaac paused, then nodded once before stepping outside into the gathering dusk, his thoughts in turmoil. That night, huddled in the bunkhouse with the other ranch hands, Isaac listened to the usual rough banter with only half an ear. His mind kept returning to the schoolhouse and the woman who seemed determined to bring change to Silverpine. "Heard you were seen carrying books for the school marm today," Seth teased, interrupting his thoughts. "Getting sweet on her, Barrett." The other men hooted with laughter. "Just being neighborly," Isaac replied, his tone warning against further comment. "Wouldn't waste your time," drawled Charlie Wilson, the oldest hand. "Town's already laying bets on when she'll hightail it back east. Pretty thing like that with her fancy education, she don't belong here." "Holden's been running his mouth about her at the saloon," another added. "Says she's trying to teach above folks' station, talking about equality and such nonsense." Isaac felt a surge of irrational anger. "Miss Harrison seems capable enough," he said, striving for indifference. "And what she teaches isn't our concern." "Might be your concern if you're calling on her," Seth grinned, "though what a schoolmarm would want with a saddled tramp like you is beyond reckoning." More laughter followed, but this time with an edge that raised Isaac's hackles. The implication was clear: Abigail Harrison was too good for the likes of him. The hell of it was, Isaac knew they were right. November brought the first heavy snow, blanketing Silverpine in pristine white that quickly turned to mud and slush on the town's streets. Isaac found himself in town more frequently as the ranch prepared for winter, securing supplies and equipment before the mountain passes became impassable. Each visit seemed to draw him to the schoolhouse, where lamps burned late into the evening as Abigail prepared lessons or cataloged her growing library. Sometimes he would pause across the street, watching her silhouette move behind the windows before continuing on his way. It was on one such evening, with the temperature dropping rapidly and snow beginning to fall again, that Isaac noticed the schoolhouse chimney wasn't drawing properly. Smoke billowed back into the building rather than rising into the night sky. Concerned, he crossed to the schoolhouse and knocked firmly on the door. When there was no answer, he tested the handle and found it unlocked. Inside, the main room was hazy with smoke, and he could hear coughing from Abigail's small office at the back. "Miss Harrison," he called, moving quickly through the room. He found her attempting to open a frozen window, her face streaked with soot and tears from the smoke irritating her eyes. "Mr. Barrett," she exclaimed between coughs, "thank goodness, the chimney, I think it's blocked." Without hesitation, Isaac threw open the window, then guided her toward the fresh air. "Stay here," he ordered. "I'll check the chimney." Outside, he climbed onto the schoolhouse roof, heedless of the slippery conditions. As he suspected, snow had capped the chimney and melted just enough to create an icy blockage. Working carefully in the growing storm, he cleared the obstruction, then descended to find Abigail waiting anxiously by the front door. "It should draw properly now," he informed her, stamping snow from his boots. "But you shouldn't stay here tonight. The building needs to air out." Abigail looked around at her papers and books. "I suppose I could go to the boarding house, though Mrs. Weber will be asleep by now." Isaac frowned. The town's small boarding house was on the other side of Silverpine, and the snow was falling heavily now. It's not safe to cross town in this weather after dark, he said. The mercantile has rooms upstairs. It's closer. They struggled through the intensifying blizzard to the mercantile, where the owner, Edward Thompson, was just closing up. He listened to their situation with concern. Of course Miss Harrison can stay in one of our guest rooms, he said, then glanced uncertainly at Isaac. But it wouldn't be proper without. I'll sleep in the storeroom, Isaac interrupted. Just to ensure Miss Harrison's safety until morning. Thompson nodded, relieved. I'll inform my wife, she'll want to provide some comforts for our guest. An hour later, Isaac found himself sitting awkwardly in the small room above the store, while Mrs. Thompson fussed over Abigail, providing a nightgown and robe from her own wardrobe. When the older woman finally left to prepare a late supper, an uncomfortable silence fell between them. You seem to have a habit of rescuing me, Mr. Barrett, Abigail said at last, attempting to lighten the mood. Isaac shrugged, just happened to be passing by. Her eyes, still reddened from the smoke, studied him thoughtfully, 3 times now. I'm beginning to wonder if you're keeping watch over me. Caught, Isaac shifted uneasily. I notice things, part of ranch work, watching for trouble before it happens. And am I trouble, Mr. Barrett? There was a hint of teasing in her voice that made his pulse quicken. No, ma'am, he answered honestly, but trouble seems drawn to you nonetheless. She laughed softly. A hazard of being different, I suppose. She moved to stand before the small stove where a fire now crackled cheerfully. May I ask you something personal? Isaac tensed. You can ask. Why do you avoid connections with others so deliberately? I've watched you in town, you're unfailingly polite, but you keep everyone at a distance. The directness of her question startled him. What makes you think I do that? Observation, she replied simply. I was trained to notice how people behave, it's essential for teaching. You carry yourself like someone who's decided that isolation is safer than attachment. Isaac stared at her, unsettled by her perception. No one had read him so accurately since his arrival in Silverpine. Maybe it is safer, he said finally. Safer perhaps, but is it living? Her voice was gentle, without judgment. The West may be wild, Mr. Barrett, but I don't believe we were meant to face it alone. Before he could respond, Mrs. Thompson returned with a tray of food, ending their conversation. But Abigail's words echoed in Isaac's mind long after he had settled onto his makeshift bed in the storeroom below. Was it living, this careful existence he had constructed? For 3 years he had survived, worked hard, earned his keep, moved through the world without allowing it to touch him. But in the quiet darkness of the storeroom, with the storm howling outside, Isaac was forced to acknowledge that survival and living were indeed different things. And somewhere along the way, Abigail Harrison had made him hunger for the latter. By December, Isaac had stopped pretending his trips to town were coincidental. Twice a week, he found reasons to visit Silverpine, each time making his way to the schoolhouse where Abigail welcomed him with increasing warmth. Their friendship grew through conversations about books she recommended, debates about the territory's future, and quiet moments helping her prepare the schoolhouse for the harsh winter ahead. Isaac found himself sharing stories of his parents' homestead, of the dreams they'd had for their land before violence had shattered everything. Abigail, in turn, told him of her childhood in Boston, her father's shipping business that had left her comfortably provided for after his death, and her decision to teach on the frontier despite her family's objections. They believed I was throwing my life away, she admitted one afternoon as they repaired a broken window shutter. My aunt was particularly vocal, said I was abandoning good marriage prospects to waste my education on frontier children who would only grow up to be farmers and miners. Isaac handed her a nail. And what did you tell her? That farmers and miners deserve knowledge as much as Boston merchants. Abigail hammered the nail with surprising skill, that I wasn't seeking a convenient marriage but meaningful work. And that I believed I could make a difference here in ways I never could in Boston. And has it been worth it? Isaac asked, genuinely curious. The hardships, the isolation, the resistance you've faced. Abigail paused, looking toward the snow-covered mountains that surrounded their valley. Yes, she said firmly, though it's been more difficult than I anticipated. There are days when the loneliness is substantial. Something in her voice made Isaac look at her sharply. You have friends here. The Thompsons, the minister's wife, Sheriff Miller. Yes, and I'm grateful for their kindness. She smiled, but there was a shadow in her eyes. But there's a difference between friendly acquaintances and true connection. Sometimes I miss being truly known by someone. Isaac understood all too well. Despite his deliberate isolation, the ache of genuine loneliness sometimes overwhelmed him in the dark hours of night. But admitting such vulnerability went against every defense he had built. "Does that sound foolish?" Abigail asked when he remained silent. "No," he finally answered, "not foolish at all." Their eyes met, and in that moment, Isaac felt something shift between them, a recognition that despite their different backgrounds, they shared a fundamental understanding of what it meant to stand apart from others. The moment was broken by the schoolhouse door swinging open, admitting a blast of cold air and Jasper Holden, evidently sober but no less hostile than during their previous encounter. "So the rumors are true," Holden sneered, looking from Abigail to Isaac. "Our precious schoolmarm is consorting with ranch hands now." Isaac straightened, his hand instinctively moving to where his gun would normally be holstered. "State your business, Holden." "My business is with Miss Harrison," Holden replied. "School board sent me to deliver a message." Abigail stepped forward. "What message, mister?" "Holden. Board's concerned about your teaching, filling children's heads with notions above their station. And now," he gestured between them, "there's talk about your moral character, entertaining men alone in the schoolhouse." Isaac moved toward him, but Abigail laid a restraining hand on his arm. "Mr. Barrett has been kind enough to assist with repairs," she said evenly. "As for my teaching, I follow the curriculum approved by the board." "With your own additions," Holden countered. "Teaching girls algebra and Latin, bringing in books about abolition and women's suffrage. This ain't Boston, Miss Harrison. We don't need our children getting ideas that'll make them dissatisfied with their proper place." "Education isn't about keeping people in their proper place," Abigail replied, her voice tightening with controlled anger. "It's about expanding minds and possibilities." Holden spat on the schoolhouse floor. "Board wants you to stick to basics, reading, writing, arithmetic, nothing more, and they want you to remember that your position here depends on maintaining appropriate behavior." His gaze flicked to Isaac. "Both inside and outside the classroom." After he left, Abigail turned away, her shoulders rigid with suppressed emotion. "Don't let him trouble you," Isaac said. "Holden's just one man and not a well-respected one at that." "But he speaks for others," she replied quietly. "I've felt the town's attitude changing. The welcome I initially received has cooled. Parents who were enthusiastic now question my methods." She turned to face him, her expression bleak. "And it seems my friendship with you has provided more ammunition against me." Isaac felt as though he'd been struck. "Because I'm a ranch hand." "Because you're a man and I'm an unmarried woman," she clarified. "Though yes, your occupation likely compounds their disapproval," she sighed. "Society allows men considerable freedom, but women, especially women in positions of influence over children, are held to impossible standards." The unfairness of it all ignited a slow-burning anger in Isaac's chest. "So we're supposed to stop being friends because of town gossip?" Abigail's eyes softened. "Is that what we are, Isaac, friends?" The use of his given name, spoken so gently, nearly undid him. "What else would we be?" he asked, though his racing heart suggested he already knew the answer. "I think we both know that what's growing between us is more complicated than friendship." She took a step closer. "At least it is for me." Isaac stood frozen, caught between longing and fear. In that moment he wanted nothing more than to close the distance between them, to discover if her lips were as soft as they appeared. But the specter of loss, that terrible, familiar companion, held him back. "Abigail," he began, her name unfamiliar yet right on his tongue. I can't." "You can't what?" she prompted when he faltered. "I can't be what you need," he finally said. "I'm just a ranch hand with nothing to offer a woman like you, and I don't," he stopped, the words sticking in his throat. "You don't what?" she pressed, her eyes searching his face. "I don't know how to care for someone again without fearing I'll lose them too," he admitted, the truth finally breaking free. "Everyone I've ever loved was taken from me. I can't go through that again." Understanding dawned in her eyes. "So you choose loneliness instead?" "I choose survival," he corrected. "Oh, Isaac," her voice was tender with compassion. "There's a difference between surviving and living, you taught me that." Before he could respond, the schoolhouse bell rang, signaling the end of their time alone. Children would be arriving soon for the afternoon session. "I should go," Isaac said, gathering his tools. Abigail nodded, the professional mask of the schoolteacher already settling over her features. Thank you for your help with the repairs. At the door, Isaac paused, about what Holden said, if my presence is causing problems for you. Don't you dare stay away on my account, she interrupted with surprising fierceness. I make my own choices, Isaac Barrett, remember that. The declaration followed him into the snowy street, a warm counter to the cold wind that whipped through Silverpine. As he mounted his horse for the ride back to the ranch, Isaac knew that something fundamental had shifted between them and within himself. For the first time since watching his family's homestead burn, he found himself wanting something more than mere survival. And that realization terrified him more than any outlaw's gun. The Christmas social at Silverpine's church was the town's most anticipated event of the year. Every family for miles around gathered to share food, music, and rare winter fellowship. Even the hands at Last Chance Ranch were given the evening off to attend if they wished. Isaac had avoided the celebration in previous years, but this December found him brushing his best shirt and polishing his boots with unusual care. Look at Barrett, Seth teased as they prepared in the bunkhouse. Primping like a man with courting on his mind. Leave him be, Frank interceded, though his eyes twinkled with knowing amusement. Every man's entitled to clean up once in a while. Isaac ignored them both, focusing on controlling the nervous energy that had him fumbling with his collar. He wasn't courting Abigail, couldn't court her, given the differences in their stations. But after their conversation in the schoolhouse, he couldn't stay away either. The church was transformed when they arrived, evergreen boughs and candles creating a warm, festive atmosphere that contrasted with the bitter cold outside. Children darted between groups of adults, their excitement palpable. A table laden with food occupied one wall, while at the front, several townspeople had assembled with instruments for dancing later in the evening. Isaac scanned the room until he spotted Abigail near the punch bowl, engaged in conversation with the minister's wife. She wore a dress of deep burgundy that brought out the golden highlights in her hair, which was arranged more elaborately than her usual schoolteacher's style. The sight of her made his chest tighten with an emotion he dared not name. Before he could approach her, a commotion at the door drew everyone's attention. Jasper Holden had arrived, and for once he wasn't alone. On his arm was Lily Matthews, one of the girls who worked at the Golden Nugget Saloon. A murmur rippled through the gathering. While Holden might be tolerated at a church function despite his drinking habits, bringing a saloon girl crossed social boundaries that even the frontier respected. Isaac watched as Reverend Thompson moved to intercept them, speaking quietly but firmly. Holden's face darkened with anger. "This is a Christmas celebration, ain't it?" he demanded loudly. "What happened to Christian charity? Or does that only apply to folks you approve of?" The room fell silent, the festive mood evaporating. Lily Matthews looked mortified, trying to tug Holden back toward the door, but he stood his ground. "You'll welcome that Eastern schoolmarm who's filling your children's heads with dangerous nonsense," Holden continued, pointing accusingly at Abigail, "but you won't accept an honest working woman who was born right here in the territory." Isaac tensed, ready to intervene if Holden's belligerence turned toward Abigail directly. But to his surprise, Abigail herself stepped forward. "Mr. Holden," she said clearly, "you're quite right that Christmas is a time of inclusion and goodwill." She turned to Lily with a warm smile. "Miss Matthews, you're very welcome at our celebration. Please, come share some punch with me." The gesture was so unexpected that even Holden seemed momentarily speechless. Lily hesitated, then detached herself from his arm and moved toward Abigail, who guided her to the refreshment table as naturally as if they were old friends. Isaac watched, amazed, as Abigail's simple act of kindness diffused the tension. Other women gradually joined them, and while there was still obvious discomfort, the celebration slowly resumed its course. When he finally made his way to Abigail's side, she greeted him with a smile that warmed him more thoroughly than the church's stove. "That was well done," he said quietly, nodding toward Lily, who was now cautiously conversing with the minister's wife. "It was only right," Abigail replied. "The social divisions here are no less rigid than in Boston, just differently arranged." She studied his face. "You look very handsome tonight, Isaac." The compliment caught him off guard. "And you're beautiful," he responded honestly, then immediately felt self-conscious. "I mean your dress is, that is." Her delighted laugh interrupted his fumbling. "Thank you. It's nice to have an occasion to wear something other than my teaching clothes." Before they could continue their conversation, the music started, and couples began forming for a Virginia reel. Isaac watched longingly as townsfolk paired off, but didn't dare ask Abigail to dance. Already he had noticed disapproving glances directed their way. As if reading his thoughts, Abigail said, "I believe I promised the first dance to Mr. Peterson's son." She nodded toward a gangly youth who was indeed approaching them. "But perhaps later." Isaac understood her implicit invitation. "I'll be here," he promised. The evening progressed with a warmth that belied the snow falling steadily outside. Isaac remained on the periphery, exchanging occasional greetings with townsfolk but mostly watching Abigail as she moved through the gathering with grace and genuine interest in each person she spoke with. He was so absorbed in observation that he didn't notice Jasper Holden's approach until the man was beside him, reeking of the whiskey he'd clearly been nipping from a flask. "She's a pretty thing, ain't she?" Holden remarked, following Isaac's gaze to Abigail. "Too good for the likes of you and me, Barrett." "You're drunk, Holden," Isaac replied evenly. "Go home before you cause more trouble." Holden chuckled darkly. "Trouble's already brewing and you don't even see it. Town's talking about you too. Schoolmarm and the saddle tramp, quite the scandal." Isaac clenched his jaw. "There's nothing scandalous about Miss Harrison being kind to everyone she meets. That's just her nature." "Is that what you think this is, kindness?" Holden's bloodshot eyes gleamed with malice. "Women like her don't truly see men like us, Barrett. We're projects to them, rough clay to be molded and improved. Or worse, exotic specimens to be experienced before they return to their real lives back east." The word struck too close to fears Isaac had harbored himself. "You don't know what you're talking about," he said, but uncertainty crept into his voice. "Don't I?" "Ask yourself why a woman with her education and prospects would settle for a ranch hand with no property and no future." Holden leaned closer. "Unless she ain't settling at all, just passing time until something better comes along." Isaac's fist clenched at his side. "Say one more word about Miss Harrison, and you'll be picking your teeth up off this floor." Holden grinned, showing tobacco-stained teeth. "Hit a nerve, did I? Truth hurts, Barrett. Sooner you accept it, the less it'll sting when she leaves, and she will leave. They always do." With that parting shot, Holden shambled away, leaving Isaac with a poisonous seed of doubt taking root alongside his growing feelings for Abigail. Later, when the promised dance finally came, Isaac found he couldn't lose himself in the joy of holding Abigail's hand through the figures of the country dance. Holden's words echoed in his mind, amplifying his own insecurities. "Is something wrong?" Abigail asked as they circled each other. "You seem troubled." "Just tired," he lied. "Long day at the ranch before coming to town." She studied him with those perceptive eyes that seemed to see straight through his defenses. "It's more than that, I think, but I won't press you here." After the dance, she led him to a quiet corner near the church's small library alcove. "Now, tell me what's really bothering you." Isaac hesitated, then decided that honesty, however painful, was necessary. "Why are you spending time with me, Abigail?" She blinked, surprised by the directness of his question. "Because I enjoy your company. Because when I'm with you, I feel seen in a way I haven't since coming to Silverpine." "But you must see how people are looking at us," he persisted. "A refined, educated woman like you, associating with a ranch hand barely one step above a drifter. It's damaging your reputation." "Do you think I care about that?" "You should," he insisted. "Your position here depends on the town's respect." "And do you think I'd surrender my own judgment to conform to narrow-minded expectations?" There was a flash of fire in her eyes now. "I choose my friends based on their character, not their occupation or social standing." "Friends," Isaac repeated, the word suddenly inadequate for the complicated emotions churning inside him. "Is that all we are?" Abigail's expression softened. "You know it's not, at least not for me." The simple admission should have elated him, but instead, it intensified his turmoil. "Then you're being foolish," he said harshly. "There's no future for us, Abigail. I have nothing to offer you, no land, no prospects, just a bunk in a ranch house, and wages that barely see me through winter." "I never asked you for material security," she countered. "I have my own means, modest though they are." "And what about children, a proper home, the respect of the community?" He gestured around them. "Look at how they're already judging you for merely dancing with me." "Imagine if you actually," he couldn't finish the thought. "If I actually loved you," she supplied quietly. "It's too late for that warning, Isaac, I already do." Her declaration struck him like a physical blow. Part of him wanted to gather her into his arms, consequences be damned. But the larger part, the part scarred by loss and hardened by years of emotional solitude, recoiled from the vulnerability her love represented. "You can't," he said hoarsely. "You don't even know me, not really." "I know you better than you think," she replied. "I know you're haunted by the family you lost. I know you believe that caring for others only leads to pain. And I know you're using our different stations as an excuse to push me away because you're afraid." Her insight was so accurate it left him speechless. In the silence that followed, Abigail's expression shifted from hope to resignation. "I won't force my affections where they're not wanted," she said with dignity. "If friendship is all you can offer, I'll accept that boundary. But don't hide behind social conventions, Isaac. At least be honest enough to admit you're rejecting me because you're too frightened to risk your heart again." With that, she turned and walked away, leaving Isaac alone in the alcove, surrounded by books but empty of the words he needed to call her back. January brought bitter cold and the heaviest snowfall Silverpine had seen in years. Isaac threw himself into ranch work, volunteering for the most grueling tasks in an effort to exhaust himself beyond thinking. But even physical fatigue couldn't banish Abigail from his thoughts. He had avoided town since the Christmas social, sending others to collect supplies or mail. The distance did nothing to ease the ache in his chest. If anything, it intensified with each passing day. At night, lying in his bunk, he replayed their last conversation endlessly, hearing again her quiet declaration of love and his own stumbling rejection. She had been right, of course. He was hiding behind differences in their stations because he was afraid, terrified, in fact, of opening himself to the possibility of devastating loss once more. But in protecting himself, he had hurt her. The memory of her wounded eyes as she walked away haunted him more persistently than any ghost from his past. "You look like hell, Barrett," Frank commented one morning as they broke ice on the water troughs. "Whatever's eating at you, either fix it or make peace with it. You're no good to the ranch half distracted." Isaac nodded grimly. "I'm handling it." "Doesn't look like handling from where I stand," Frank replied. "Looks like running." The accusation stung because it was true. He had been running from Abigail, from his feelings, from the possibility that love might still have a place in his life despite everything he had lost. That afternoon, with Frank's words still echoing in his mind, Isaac made a decision. He would ride into town, speak to Abigail, and, apologize, explain. He wasn't sure what he would say, only that he needed to see her to make right the wrong he had done in pushing her away. But before he could act on his resolution, Seth rode into the ranch yard at a gallop, his horse lathered despite the cold. "Fire in town," he shouted. "The schoolhouse is burning." Isaac felt the blood drain from his face. "Abigail." "Don't know," Seth panted. "Sheriff's organizing a bucket brigade. Frank sent me to get more men." Without waiting for further details, Isaac mounted his horse and spurred it towards Silverpine, heedless of the treacherous road conditions. Fear clawed at his throat, not the abstract fear of potential future loss that had kept him from Abigail, but the immediate, visceral terror that she might already be gone. Smoke was visible from miles away, a dark column rising into the winter sky. As Isaac galloped into town, he saw that the schoolhouse was indeed engulfed in flames, the fire greedily consuming the wooden structure despite the efforts of townspeople passing buckets of water. He leaped from his horse, searching desperately for Abigail among the crowd. When he didn't see her, he grabbed Sheriff Miller's arm. "Where is Miss Harrison? Was she inside?" The sheriff's grim expression sent a spike of dread through Isaac's heart. "She was giving extra lessons to the Wilkins children when the fire started, got them out safely, but went back in for something." Isaac didn't wait to hear more. Ignoring shouts of warning, he ran toward the burning building, tying his bandana over his nose and mouth as he went. The heat was intense even before he reached the door, but he pressed forward, ducking low to avoid the worst of the smoke. "Abigail," he called, his voice muffled by the bandana and the roar of the flames. "Abigail, where are you?" The main classroom was an inferno, desks and books providing ample fuel for the blaze. Isaac moved around the perimeter, staying close to the walls where the floor seemed most stable. A fit of coughing from the back office drew him forward. There he found Abigail on her knees, a small iron chest clutched to her chest as she tried to crawl toward the door, clearly disoriented by the smoke. "Isaac," she gasped, her soot-streaked face registering disbelief. "I'm here," he confirmed, kneeling beside her. "We have to get out now, the roof's about to go." He took the chest from her arms and helped her to her feet, supporting her as they made their way back through the classroom. The smoke was thicker now, making it nearly impossible to see. Isaac navigated by memory and instinct, one arm around Abigail's waist, the other holding the precious chest she had risked her life to save. They were mere feet from the door when a burning beam crashed down behind them, sending sparks and embers flying. The sudden flare illuminated their path, and with a final surge of effort, Isaac half-carried Abigail across the threshold and into the relative safety of the street. Eager hands reached for them, pulling them away from the burning building just as the roof collapsed with a thunderous crash, sending a geyser of sparks into the winter sky. In the chaos that followed, Isaac refused to leave Abigail's side as she was examined by the town doctor. She had suffered smoke inhalation but no burns, and after drinking water and breathing clean air, her color began to return. "What were you thinking, going back into that fire?" Isaac demanded when they were finally left alone, his relief manifesting as anger. "You could have been killed." Abigail gestured to the iron chest, which sat beside her on the bench where they had been placed. "I couldn't let them burn," she said hoarsely. "Let what burn, what was worth risking your life." She opened the chest, revealing stacks of letters, a few small books, and a daguerreotype of a distinguished-looking couple, her parents, Isaac assumed. "My family," she explained. "Their letters, my mother's Bible, the only images I have of them." She looked up at him, her eyes red-rimmed but steady. "Some things are irreplaceable, Isaac. Some connections are worth any risk." The simple truth of her words struck him with the force of revelation. All this time he had been avoiding attachment to prevent loss, but in doing so he had denied himself the very connections that made life meaningful. "I thought I'd lost you," he confessed, his voice breaking. "When I heard the schoolhouse was on fire, I thought—" He couldn't continue, the horror of the possibility choking his words. Abigail reached for his hand, her fingers curling around his soot-blackened ones. "But you didn't lose me. You came for me instead." "I'll always come for you," he promised, the words emerging from some deep, previously locked chamber of his heart. "Abigail, I've been a fool. Everything you said at Christmas was right. I was hiding behind excuses because I was afraid." "And now," she asked, her gaze searching his face. "Now I'm still afraid," he admitted, "but I'm more afraid of living without you than I am of loving you." Around them, the townspeople were still fighting to contain the fire, to prevent it from spreading to neighboring buildings. The winter air was thick with smoke and shouted instructions. It was hardly the romantic setting Isaac would have chosen for this moment, but he couldn't wait another second to speak the truth that had finally broken free. "I love you, Abigail Harrison. I've loved you since you stood up to Jasper Holden in the general store, maybe even before that. I love your courage, your conviction, your kindness to everyone regardless of their station." He squeezed her hand. "I have nothing to offer but myself, and I know that's not nearly enough for a woman like you." "It's everything I want," she interrupted, tears cutting clean tracks through the soot on her cheeks. "Just you, Isaac, just your heart. That's all I've ever wanted." In that moment, with the schoolhouse burning behind them and the future uncertain before them, Isaac did what he had longed to do for months. He leaned forward and kissed her, gently at first, then with growing certainty as she responded with equal fervor. When they broke apart, breathless for reasons that had nothing to do with smoke, Isaac became aware of the silence that had fallen around them. The entire town of Silverpine, it seemed, had paused in their firefighting efforts to witness the unexpected embrace between the schoolteacher and the ranch hand. Some faces registered shock, others disapproval. But there were smiles too from Sheriff Miller, from the Thompsons, from the children Abigail had saved. "Well," Jasper Holden's voice cut through the silence, "there's a sight I never thought to see. The high and mighty schoolmarm kissing a saddle tramp," he laughed derisively. "What will Boston society say when they hear about this?" Isaac felt Abigail stiffen beside him, but before either of them could respond, another voice spoke up. "They'll say she found a good man," Frank Miller declared, stepping forward. "Barrett's the best hand on my ranch, honest, hardworking, and brave enough to run into a burning building when others held back." He looked around at the gathered townspeople. "Any man who'd risk his life that way deserves respect, not mockery." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. The minister nodded solemnly. "Indeed, the Lord works in mysterious ways, bringing souls together through trials and tribulations." "Holden wasn't finished." "She still ain't got a schoolhouse," he pointed out, "and Barrett still ain't got property or prospects. What kind of future is that?" "We'll rebuild the schoolhouse," Edward Thompson declared, "better than before. As for prospects," he glanced at Frank, Didn't you mention needing a foreman come spring, what with Jenkins retiring? Frank's eyes twinkled. I might have. Job comes with the use of the old homestead cabin on the northeast section. Needs work, but it's solid. Could be a good start for a man looking to settle down. Isaac stared at his boss in astonishment. Frank, are you offering? Offering you a promotion you've earned, Frank confirmed, and a chance to build something of your own if you're ready to stop running from life and start living it. Abigail squeezed Isaac's hand. What did you say, cowboy? Are you ready? Looking into her eyes, Isaac found the answer he'd been seeking since the day he'd lost his family. The past couldn't be changed, and the future held no guarantees. But love made the risk worthwhile. Yes, he said simply, with you I'm ready for anything. Spring came early to Elkhorn Valley that year, as if nature herself was eager to heal the scars of winter. The new schoolhouse rose swiftly under the combined efforts of the townspeople, larger and sturdier than its predecessor, with a proper library wing that Abigail had designed herself. Isaac, meanwhile, threw himself into renovating the foreman's cabin on Last Chance Ranch. The small homestead had good bones, as Frank had promised, but years of neglect had left it in need of considerable work. Each evening after his regular duties, Isaac repaired the roof, replaced rotted floorboards, and constructed new furniture from lumber hauled from the sawmill. Abigail visited whenever her teaching duties allowed, bringing picnic suppers and helping with tasks that required an extra pair of hands. Despite the continued murmurs of disapproval from some quarters of Silverpine, she moved through the world with the same calm dignity that had first captured Isaac's heart. What do you think of yellow curtains for the kitchen windows? She asked one evening as they sat on the cabin's newly built porch, watching the sunset paint the distant mountains. Mrs. Thompson has fabric she's willing to sell me. Yellow would be nice, Isaac agreed, his arm around her shoulders. Cheerful. Abigail rested her head against him. It's coming together beautifully, Isaac. I can already imagine our life here. Our life, the word still sent a thrill of wonder through him. It won't be what you're used to, he cautioned, an echo of his old fears surfacing. Not like Boston. Thank goodness for that, she replied with feeling. Boston never felt like home the way this does. She gestured to the surrounding landscape, the mountains touched with the last golden light, the meadows where wildflowers were beginning to bloom, the creek that burbled past the edge of what would soon be their garden. Besides, home isn't a place, it's where love resides. Isaac kissed the top of her head, marveling at the journey that had brought them to this moment. A year ago, he had been a man determined to move through life untouched by connection. Now he woke each morning with purpose beyond mere survival, with hope for a future shared with the remarkable woman beside him. 1 month until the wedding, Abigail murmured. Are you nervous? About marrying you. Never, he answered truthfully. About having half the territory watching us say our vows, maybe a little. The planned ceremony had grown from a simple affair into something of an event. Frank had insisted on hosting it at the ranch, and it seemed that everyone in Silverpine, even those who had initially disapproved of their match, had found reasons to attend. They're curious, Abigail said with a laugh. The schoolteacher and the cowboy, we've given them something to talk about besides cattle prices and weather predictions. Let them talk, Isaac said, drawing her closer. As long as I have you, nothing else matters. And he meant it. The gossip that had once concerned him now seemed trivial compared to the joy he found in Abigail's company. The town might have laughed at his chosen bride initially, but Isaac knew with bone-deep certainty that she held his heart forever. On their wedding day in late April, Last Chance Ranch was transformed. Wildflowers adorned every surface, tables groaned with food prepared by the women of Silverpine, and even the weather cooperated with clear skies and gentle breezes. Isaac stood beneath an arch of twisted willow branches, Frank beside him as best man, watching as the gathered crowd turned to witness Abigail's approach. She walked alone, having no family to give her away, but carried herself with such grace that no one would have thought her lacking. Her dress was simple but elegant, ivory silk that caught the sunlight as she moved. Her honey-blonde hair was crowned with a circlet of spring blossoms, and her sage-green eyes never left Isaac's face as she made her way toward him. In that moment, Isaac saw not just the woman he loved, but the future they would build together. Children running across the meadow, evenings spent reading by lamplight, shared joys and sorrows weathered together. The vision was so powerful it brought tears to his eyes. Dearly beloved, Reverend Thompson began as Abigail reached Isaac's side. We are gathered here today to witness the union of two souls who have found in each other that rarest of treasures, a love strong enough to overcome every obstacle placed in its path. As they spoke their vows, Isaac heard whispers among the guests, not mocking, as he might once have feared, but touched by the evident devotion between the unlikely couple. "I, Isaac, take you, Abigail, to be my lawfully wedded wife," he said, his voice steady with conviction. "I promise to cherish and respect you, to support your dreams as you have supported mine, and to face whatever challenges life brings us together from this day forward, for as long as we both shall live." Abigail's answering vows were equally heartfelt, spoken with the quiet confidence that had first drawn him to her. "I, Abigail, take you, Isaac, to be my lawfully wedded husband. I promise to stand beside you through all of life's joys and sorrows, to create a home filled with love and learning, and to remind you each day that some connections are worth any risk from this day forward. For as long as we both shall live." When the Reverend pronounced them husband and wife, the cheer that rose from the assembled guests seemed to echo across the valley, a communal blessing on a union that had once been the subject of speculation and doubt. The celebration that followed lasted well into the evening, with music and dancing under lantern light. Isaac and Abigail moved through it all in a bubble of shared happiness, accepting congratulations from those who had supported them from the beginning and tentative good wishes from those who had not. Even Jasper Holden made an appearance, sober for the occasion, offering a gruffly delivered blessing that suggested even the most hardened skeptic could be won over in time. As the festivities wound down and the newly married couple prepared to depart for their cabin, now transformed into a true home, Frank called for silence. "I'd like to propose a toast," the rancher announced, raising his glass. "To Isaac and Abigail Barrett, proof that the frontier doesn't just test our strength and courage, but our hearts as well. May you build a life as sturdy as the mountains and as deep as the valleys. And may we all be reminded that sometimes, the most unlikely matches turn out to be exactly right." "To Isaac and Abigail," the crowd echoed, glasses raised toward the starlit sky. Later that night, alone in their cabin for the first time as husband and wife, Isaac held Abigail close, still hardly believing that this remarkable woman had chosen him, had fought for him even when he had been too afraid to fight for himself. "Happy?" he asked softly, stroking her hair as they lay together in the quiet darkness. "Completely," she assured him, "and you?" "More than I ever thought possible." He hesitated, then added, "Thank you for not giving up on me, even when I gave you every reason to." Abigail raised herself on one elbow to look down at him, her expression visible in the moonlight streaming through their bedroom window. "I knew from the first that beneath all that careful distance beat a heart capable of great love. I just had to be patient enough for you to recognize it too." Isaac drew her down for a kiss that expressed everything words could not: gratitude, wonder, and the profound joy of having found home in another person's arms. Outside their window, the Montana night spread vast and beautiful, stars scattered across the darkness like promises. Within the cabin's walls, two people who had once been alone began the intricate dance of building a shared life, one day, one moment, one beat of their joined hearts at a time. The town might have laughed at his chosen bride once, but as Isaac Barrett drifted to sleep with Abigail in his arms, he knew with absolute certainty that she would hold his heart forever, and that knowledge made all the difference in the world.